Hello everyone, welcome to the Parlimenthuwa YouTube series. As you know, through this series, which is conducted in all three languages, we are here to educate the youth on the parliamentary systems. And right now, I would like to ask you all, being Sri Lankans, what is your point of view about the Sri Lankan parliamentary system? Do we have an effective parliament? This discussion today, we're going to focus about that and a lot more. The topic today for today's discussion is effective parliamentary systems around the world, and we're going to draw comparisons to the Sri Lankan parliamentary systems. And to do so, let me introduce you to the guest we have on board today. That is Dr. George Cooke. He's a diplomatic historian and he's also the initiator of the Aware Log initiative. Hello to you, Dr. Cooke.
Hello.
How have you been?
Very well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining with our YouTube series today. And at the start itself, I would like to draw your attention and ask, how important is it for us Sri Lankans to know about the current parliamentary system and to be aware about it all?
Very important. Why do we say that? Each of us have a vote. We live in a democracy. This is the oldest democracy in this part of the world. We have an opportunity every time an election comes around to go out there and cast our votes.
That's right.
But it has got to be an informed decision that we make. It's not just a ritual that we conduct where you just go and cross some box out on that ballot paper and drop it in the box and walk away.
That's right.
You've got to be making a decision that is going to be impactful because every vote matters. Some people sit back and think, oh, what's the point of voting? There's no point, I'm not going to do it. We're taking it for granted sometimes. People in this country have fought for the right to vote. We have now the ability to enjoy that. Every few years we have elections of different nature. And this is where we must never take it for granted. But when it comes to actually casting a vote, when it comes to actually engaging in the democratic process, we need to be making decisions that are not just about me, myself and I. Very often people would go there and vote with their wallets. They're thinking, how am I going to benefit? What is this going to do to me? How is this going to change my life? Are we looking at that bigger picture? But this is where we have to then start thinking about the fact of when we see people coming forward for election, are they talking about policies? Are they talking about programs? Are they talking about the future? Or is it just a face? Is it just an argument on TV, a battle that they may have? They'll be trading accusations against each other, but they're very good friends at the end of the day.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So this is where voters must start demanding policy decisions, policy stances. Where do people stand on certain issues? That is very important for the voter to make an informed decision.
I think that's important that's an important discussion to set the base because as we know, you mentioned everything has been taken for granted at some point, but now we all came into a standstill with this economic crisis and the political issues. Now people are very vigilant. So it's important for all of us to know what we are talking about and take things forward. And as my first question digging into the subject, I would like to ask you, what exactly is representative democracy and how does it operate and what are other forms of government?
So when we talk about representative democracy, democracy is where all get involved. Democracy in general. So we can go to looking at who rules. We can look at the spectrum. You can have no one ruling, and that's an anarchy. You can have a few, and that would be an oligarchy or a junta that is in power. You can have one, and that would be a system of autocracy, even a monarchy in the past, the way kings, queens, emperors, empresses ruled in the past. Or you can have all. You might wonder, how are all going to be involved in ruling a country? But that is where all of us have a vote. So we are giving our franchise, our vote, to someone to go and lead on our behalf, to make decisions on our behalf. Are we going to be happy with every decision they make? No. Are we going to disagree with every decision they make? No. So we've got to weigh the pros and cons there. That is where once you have cast, you have a lot of power on election day in a democracy. That is where it is representative. People over a certain age, irrespective of gender, have a vote. If you have registered on the electoral list, you can go cast your vote and you become part of the system. So in a representative democracy, as opposed to a pure democracy where you would have the people making the decision. Now we can't have everybody convening all the time to make a decision. That was done in ancient Greece, in ancient Rome, when there were city-states.
Yeah.
But today we are talking about representative democracy where people give their votes or their franchise to one particular person or a group of people who are then entrusted with governing, with leading the country. Now those people have to make decisions on behalf of the rest. So they are the representatives. So when we look at a parliament, sometimes we criticize a parliament. We must never forget it is representative of the people of that country. So representative democracy is one of the most progressive forms that we have on the world stage today. We see examples from around the world. It's the norm virtually in the world today. You have our own country, our neighboring countries. As long as it's a country in which there has been the due process of electing leaders, but not doing it just for the sake of doing it. It's not where you get systems like in North Korea, where the North Korean leader will win with a massive number of votes. Now, that's not exactly a democratic system, so we've got to understand that.
Yeah.
But whether you look at the United States or India or Britain or Germany or France or Pakistan or Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, India, any of our countries, we all have a representative democratic system where people are electing their representative leaders.
Yeah, just like you said, there's no point of blaming the parliament at one point because we are responsible. We gave them that power and authority. No point of asking them to go home without us taking the responsibility. That's where the democratic...
We have elected them. They haven't come in illegally.
Yeah.
They have not come in through some wrong means.
Yeah.
Even if you come in on the national list, that is still a provision that is available.
That's right.
It's not a sudden entry through gunpoint, you're not holding a gun to somebody and saying, make me a member of parliament. That's not the case.
Exactly.
You have come through some kind of established system that is part and parcel of the structure of governance in the country. So we blaming them sometimes, we've got to also point the fingers back at ourselves. What have we done? And when I say we, I'm talking about the polity as a whole, the country as a whole. I mean, sometimes as individuals you might argue, oh, I didn't vote for that person. Yeah, but somebody did.
Yeah.
And that person is also a Sri Lankan. That person is also a member of the country and the citizen, and they have the right to vote as well.
That's right. A lot to keep in mind when going forward. Taking responsibility. Your vote matters. It's not just a tick that you put in on paper. This is what we need to understand as well. Now, George, I would like to ask you, when talking about different models of legislature, we know, I would like to know the characteristics of the unicameral and bicameral models of legislature.
So what we have in Sri Lanka is unicameral.
Right.
But we had a bicameral in the past. If you look at what happened from 1947 onwards, the year before independence, when we started changing, you see, even for us to gain our democratic standards, standardization, democratization of Sri Lanka, Ceylon as it was then, it was a gradual process. It wasn't something that happened overnight.
Right.
We didn't suddenly decide we're going to have a parliament from tomorrow, we're going to have something else the next day. This was a gradual transition of power from the British to Ceylon that started decades before independence. And this was where until 1971, we had a system in which we had a bicameral system. 2nd of October 1971, we did away with the upper house of parliament. That was the Senate that we had. Now, then we had the Senate, we had the House of Representatives, and that was the main deciding factor. You have a similar arrangement in the United Kingdom. You have the House of Lords and you have the House of Commons. Now, you might think House of Lords sounds very fancy. House of Commons sounds very ordinary.
Yeah.
But House of Commons has the real power. That's where people have elected representatives. Those who are going to the House of Lords are ones who have been nominated. They are elder statesmen, personalities who have made a contribution, who have been given some kind of position in society. But when it comes to our system, we did away with that in 1971 and then we started having only parliament. So we have a unicameral system thereafter. 72 we changed the constitution, same arrangement continues, 78 up to date. But if you take countries like the United States, they still have a similar arrangement where they have the US Congress. Now the Congress consists of the Senate and representatives. Right. So that is where those two houses constitute what is known as the US Congress. So when it comes to the decision making, it has to be passed by both in that country.
Okay.
So we have this arrangement in several countries. Why? Why do they do that? Because it's some kind of check and balance to some extent, especially in the US, where the president might have control over the Senate, not have a majority in the House of Representatives, or it might be the other way around.
It differs from country to country.
It differs at different times because it depends on your popularity, your policies, circumstances in the country. All of that will vary. Now, how do you get legislature through? Now, in a unicameral system like ours, for example, if you have a majority in parliament, you can do a lot of things.
Right.
You can change a lot of things. Change it for the good, great. Change it for the bad, you're doomed.
That's right.
But you can't question it. There is a majority in parliament and it has been approved the legal way. So, in the United States, for example, it has to go through these systems, checks and balances, which will have to be modified to an extent where you can't do everything you want to do. You have to be mindful that you have got to take different views on board. So, that is where having that bicameral system in that sense is very good, because it ensures there is a check and balance system right throughout. But a unicameral system is also very good because you can get a lot of things done through parliament. Parliament is a very important body in any country. That is where you have representation of the whole of the country, not just like the cabinet or the government, which is only those who have gotten the majority votes. Parliament is representative of everyone.
Right. And before we go to the next question, I would like to ask you now, it's important to also understand what executive presidency is. Would you like to elaborate on this? Because in the examples that you took, there is no executive president, but in Sri Lanka, we have the parliament and also we have a president with the executive powers. Would you like to elaborate?
We introduced the executive presidency through the 1978 constitution. Now, we had a governor general until 1972. So, we had British governors before that. After that, we had the governor general, who was the nominee of the head of state, who functions as the head of state on behalf of the British monarch. Now, that person was not found by the British monarch in Sri Lanka. The king before that, or the current queen, didn't look around Sri Lankan society and pick so and so or so and so. It was based on the nomination from the Prime Minister. So, there are some who argue saying, oh, at independence we didn't get real independence. That's not the case. We were making our own decisions. There are lots of things to prove that. But this is where until 1972, we had a head of state who was the Governor General, who was there to appoint the Prime Minister, conduct the swearing in. So, it was a figurehead role, we can argue to a large extent, but in times of crisis, the Governor General is very important. We have seen that in the 50s, in the 60s, at various points, the Governor General was very crucial. Prime Minister commands the majority in Parliament, true, but the Governor General sits in a capacity in which they are able to sometimes guide the Prime Minister, help assist the Prime Minister. Now, in 72, we became a republic. We were not the dominion of Ceylon anymore, we became the Republic of Sri Lanka. At that point, that Governor General, William Gopal Lava, became our first president. But still, like the Governor General, it was a figurehead position. In 78, after Jaya Jayawardena won the general election in 77, he introduced the executive presidential system where the power now comes from the Prime Minister to the President. The President enjoys all power and the Prime Minister has a reduced role. But it always depends on who was in that position. There are some Prime Ministers who have had a very big role to play or who have crafted their position in such a way in which they have contributed immensely. There are some who have been relatively weaker. But the executive presidency comes in at that point, and some of the arguments that were made at that stage were, why do we need an executive presidency? A Westminster system, a Prime Minister can be voted out by evening. Parliament, in Britain for example, look at how Boris Johnson is now on his way out. His term is coming to an end. He has to now step down because his party doesn't want him there. Margaret Thatcher, the same thing happened to her. But in an executive presidential system, you have certain conditions. The president has to resign, as we saw in Sri Lanka, or the president's term has to end, or you have to have an impeachment motion through parliament, which is a long process in Sri Lanka. Impeaching a president is next to impossible, we can argue, because of the various steps that are involved, and in the process you can bypass it somewhere there and stop it. They tried it with Ransinga Premadasa, it didn't work. It has not worked thereafter either. So the executive presidency is very strong, and it was felt that for development that was good. These are some of the arguments that were put forward when the presidency was introduced, the executive presidency. So it means that the executive is there. You also have the legislature. Now you also have the judiciary. Now you need the executive and the legislature. Why? Legislature is approving budgets, finance. The budget is debated in parliament. So the executive can function with money coming approved by parliament. The executive has only a certain amount that they can spend. So there is supposed to be a check and balance amongst these main pillars of state. But we also have executive presidents in other countries. You have a similar system in a country like France. You have a very similar arrangement to what Sri Lanka has in France. You have had presidents from one party, prime ministers from a different party. In France also, in several other countries. It's not a case of always an executive president needs to have a prime minister who's going to be from their same party. In Sri Lanka, we have seen that. We saw that, we are seeing it right now. We saw that in 1994, D.B. Wijetunga was president, Chandrika Banana Kumaratunga was prime minister. Chandrika Banana Kumaratunga was president, Ranil Wickremesinghe was prime minister. You saw that again, Maithripala Sirisena was from one party, Ranil Wickremesinghe another party. So we have seen this on numerous occasions. So Sri Lanka is now really going into this sharing of power, cohabitation.
The non-party.
We are looking at it from we are really putting it into practice now. But the executive still remains strong. Of course, it depends on whether you want to dilute the powers and certain amendments have been brought at certain times, or you want to further strengthen it. That also has happened in Sri Lanka. So at various times we have had changes, but the executive still remains quite strong.
So when compared to other countries who have the same, executive presidential powers, what are some of the examples that Sri Lanka can take forward?
In terms of how we consolidate that power and use it. You see, that's a lot of good power that can be used. Now, when you become the executive president, you are the president of all of Sri Lanka. Whoever votes for you or whoever doesn't vote for you also belongs to the country, and you have to preside over the entirety of the country. Not a group, not a community, not a religious backing. You can't do it in that way.
That's right.
And we've seen people trying to do it and they made a huge mistake in the process. We've got to be very mindful that when you go into that exalted position, the other factor is the person who was there the day before the election, the person who is there on the day of the election and the day of the results is still the same person. When you get the election result, you don't suddenly become all-knowing. You become all-powerful. Your office changes, your table, chair, vehicle, house, probably all those things change. But you remain the same person. You must have really strong people around you. People who are going to be able to challenge your decisions, ask you, question you. Of course, in a cordial manner. It's not going to become an aggressive battle between a president and their advisors or their key people. If you look at other countries out there, they have to attract leaders. Leaders have to attract people who are going to really help them make informed decisions. Because they don't know every policy. You can't expect them to know foreign policy, health, agriculture, land, labor, education. You can't find one person who is going to know everything about everything.
But in Sri Lanka recently, we
think we know everything.
How they were just handpicked and put.
We think the sad thing in Sri Lanka is very often you will surround yourself with people who are yes men, who will say, yes sir, you're right sir, absolutely sir, whatever you say sir. So who are you putting in trouble? You're putting the leader in trouble. That is one of the first things leaders must realize. If you have people who are pandering to your whims and fancies and agreeing to everything you're doing, that's a moment of caution. They are going to lead you down the wrong path, leading to your destruction. They will survive. They will find ways to survive. They will go and cling on to the next leader. They'll find someone else to stick on to. You suffer. We saw that in Sri Lanka too. Those people surround themselves with the wrong people, and as a result, they are the ones who are losing out. And when are we going to learn that lesson? That is something that we have still not learned. Most unfortunately. Hopefully in the future we will. But that is something that we have still not learned.
I think it's important that you know and you are educated about all these systems without just appointing somebody to get your work done. It's important to think about a country as a whole to go forward, because as we came into a standstill with the economic crisis, we all know how we're all suffering. We've all been standing in queues. Why? Because the system errors, right? The proper decisions weren't taken at the right time. So this is important. So according to recent studies, George, I would like to ask you, what are some of the best practice parliamentary systems around the world, and would you like to elaborate on that?
So you have something called the Interparliamentary Union, the IPU. This is a global organization of political parliaments from around the world that are coming together. You have various committees. It's dating back to 1889. So this has been a grouping that has been able to set standards to help parliaments reach those standards. In what areas? Firstly, democracy. In terms of democratic norms, democratic ideals. They should not remain ideals, they should remain practical. You should be able to put them into operation. How are you able to share best practices between parliaments, between countries? This is where even if you arrange a meeting between representatives of one parliament and those of another, that's really going to be an opportunity for them to share their experiences. It's not a holiday to go on. It's not some kind of trip. So that is where it's a learning process. If you have your members of parliament traveling to another country to learn about their systems, there must be something that they're going to gain from that. You're not going to come and replicate it in your own country, but you're going to be exposed to that system. You're going to understand flaws, successful aspects of their system, things that we can reflect on within our own. And this is where organizations like the IPU, which Sri Lanka is a member of, is looking at democratic standardization, how we are trying to look at democratization as a whole across society. Because remember, democracy is not just people going and voting. You need to have democracy seeping into every level. Now, are we okay with that? Are we accepting of that? Democracy within political parties? If you look at the United States, if you want to become the presidential candidate of a party, you have an election within the party. It's a long process to get there. But then, quite ironically, when you have the vote, you have people voting, but you also have an electoral college, which will determine the winner. And sometimes the winner has not been the same as how the people voted for. Now, that's their system. And that's because in the past they felt that voters would not make the right decision. Now, that's not democracy, is it?
That's not democracy.
But that's their system, that's how it's worked, that's what they feel is a fallback in case there is some kind of misrepresentation to some extent. If you saw Hillary Clinton got more popular votes than Donald Trump, but she didn't become president. This has happened before this on numerous occasions as well. So this is where organizations like the IPU, or when you look at parliamentary systems around the world, there is a mandated requirement where you are learning from each other. You're learning those best practices. So as I said, democracy, they're looking at gender equality, they're looking at youth representation in parliaments. Now when they look at our country, they're looking at how many people below the age of 45 are in parliament, right? They're looking at gender balance in parliament. They're looking at human rights cases against parliamentarians, either cases filed against parliamentarians or issues where parliamentarians have gone and violated someone else's human rights. So it's a check and balance system where you are trying to compare and contrast different models out there, different systems out there. They meet twice a year, they have various committees, peace and international security, various aspects where they are trying to improve the standard. So when you have a group like the IPO, you can't say, oh, we didn't know this, we don't know how to do that. There is a global body, a very old global body, which is supposed to be democracy is one of its highest, most noblest groupings. You've got to learn the best from it. And that's where groups like the IPU are able to share, to provide information, provide data. And you don't have an excuse at the end of the day.
That's right.
We must come to a point where all of our parliaments are going to achieve the best. Because remember, democracy is not a target. We can't say democracy achieved, now full stop, now it's done. Democracy is alive. It's a journey, we're doing it every day. Now, it calls for a lot. You've got to compromise, you've got to sacrifice. It's not just you set up a system and you say, okay, it's functioning, job done.
Yeah, no.
On a daily basis, you have to ensure that democracy is functioning. Now that's hard.
Yeah, I think that is a good lesson, because earlier most of the Sri Lankans, I think this is exactly why I keep repeating my education is important, where you thought the democracy part comes in only during elections and you just vote and you appoint few leaders and then your work is done, or your work is not done because the leaders take it for granted. And I don't think even the leaders are aware about certain things and how the system has to be transparent and taken forward, because they play their own role. Just like you said, before the election it's the same person, at the election same person, right next, it's not, you're not going to drop from the sky. So this is important to be discussed. And we saw again when economic crisis came into situation, again the democracy topic came into discussion, where a lot of people got together for one country's decision. I think before we take everything up to the corners, there has to be some in between where people get involved and democracy has to be spoken. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because this is where, unless we realize the role we play,
Yeah.
don't accuse others, don't point fingers, don't criticize, because you are also responsible for that.
Yeah.
And you have kept quiet. You have been silent. You have thought, as you said, I cast my vote, now my job is done. No, it's not done.
Exactly.
It's not done. If a leader makes a promise, if they make some kind of pledge at the election, we must hold them responsible for that. You must keep asking them, you promised that, where is it? When is it going to be delivered? What are you going to do about it? What action have you taken so far? Instead, they think we have forgotten, we do forget.
Yes.
And they carry on without any concern. Until the next election comes on, they pledge the same thing again, and again we say, okay, they'll do it this time, let's go and vote for them. We are the ones who are at fault. We are the ones who are at fault. We are not holding them responsible to do their job better. In an organization, you are held responsible by your boss.
Yeah.
And here the politician's boss are the people. So the boss tells you, have you done that? Have you finished this? Have you done this on time? Are we asking our leaders those questions? Instead,
That's exactly what we have to do.
Yeah, we have this mentality that, oh, they are the leader, they are up there. We are down here, we are the people. We are the ones who are putting them in those positions to lead us, to govern us on our behalf. How much more we have to be involved in the process.
I guess the fact that the Sri Lankans, we say, give it 2 weeks, they'll forget it. Even the leaders are used to say that, give it 2 weeks, people will forget it. This shouldn't be the case where just after voting, you shouldn't just carry on with your family work or this thing. You have to remember you're living in a country where you are also responsible for what is happening out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There are so many instances where the media will focus on a particular issue and then we all talk about it.
Yeah, like for example, COVID-19.
We don't talk about it after that. Then we focus on something else. Now we think that is finished, that is over, that is not there. It's very much around.
Yeah.
It's very much there. So we must look internally. That is where when we talk about Sri Lanka, the world, Sri Lanka and other countries, we say, oh, that country is interfering, this country is poking their fingers. What about what is happening inside? Are we creating an environment for others to do that? Similarly, within the country, without pointing fingers at the leaders, realize what we have done. Have we fulfilled our civic responsibility? As citizens who have a vote, who have the ability, who have citizenship in this country, have we done the right by the country? People criticize, oh, Sri Lanka, you can't live in Sri Lanka, we're going to leave Sri Lanka, things are not working in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is not to blame.
Yeah.
People in Sri Lanka are the ones who are doing this to the country. When you look at our resources, natural, when you look at all the skilled workers that we have, people, we have brains, we have talent in this country, we're completely ignoring all those factors. And that's where we talk about brain drain. So many people are leaving this country, in the thousands. They say that every hour a certain number are leaving the country. Statistics have been put out now.
Yeah, yeah.
In 5 to 10 years, we are going to see a huge impact on this country, its leadership. I don't want to think it's going down, but it probably very likely is going to happen that way. Why? Because we have some of the best leaving the country. So then how can you plan for the future? How can you do that in the future? Are you trying to bring them back at some point? Are you trying to re-attract them back into the country, give them opportunities within the country, create a conducive environment within the country? See, in a democracy, it becomes, you have a lot of freedom. You must know then where to draw the line. My freedom of speech, my freedom of expression must not infringe upon your freedoms. Do we know that? You see, I mean, that's going into further aspects of implementing democracy, where there's a very thin line between free speech and hate speech.
That's right.
We have got to know where to stop, where to do that. All of us, not just some of us. No extremes. We must not be going to extremes. Sadly, we do. Sadly, we do on a lot of platforms.
I think this time around, as we are talking about this timely discussion, it's important that we know it's not the time for us to leave the country, but to stick around and, you know, get the country together, because as you mentioned also, it's the people who are responsible for it. And on this matter, I think we have taken a lot of international attention, like past few days, and still we have the attention of the world for Sri Lankan government, the parliamentary system. What do you think, like how does an effective system of governance strengthen a country's image internationally?
Because when people look at a country, they're not looking at you and I as individuals within the country. They're looking at the leadership of the country. They're looking at decisions the leadership makes. They're looking at important speeches, policies, programs being implemented. Now, that has got to reflect positively outside there. If you want investors to come into a country, you must make sure that there are very investor-friendly policies being implemented in your country. People won't come otherwise. If you default on your debt, who would want to give you a loan? Because you are known to default. You've got to start paying. You've got to find ways to start paying. You've got to do that so that you're going to build confidence out there in the international community. If you want tourists to come to your country, you can't have a single situation in which there is going to be rape, there's going to be murder of a tourist. There's going to be some kind of violation of their rights. You can't have that happening, because those stories are going to be highlighted in those countries. That's going to become big news over there. How much are we conscious of how people are viewing us? Certainly, we are not the most important country in the world. We must be very frank about that. We sometimes think the world revolves around us. And that's probably coming from an island mentality, where we sit on the island and think the universe revolves around Sri Lanka. Yes, we have an important location, but there are other countries also that have important locations. We are not the only one. So we are competing all the time with countries in our region, countries in the world. How much we have got to be mindful of what are they doing, how are they going about, what are they doing to attract investment, what are they doing to attract tourists, what are they doing to increase their foreign exchange earnings, what policies are they implementing. This is where you mentioned that word education, awareness. We need to be going on to that level so that we are aware of what is happening in the outside world. The outside world is watching us to see what we are doing, and now they are watching us to learn what not to do. Sri Lanka was a country at one time that was being held up for various reasons. We have been talking about 1931, universal franchise, oldest democracy in this part of the world. We've had democratic governance from then onwards, independence, model colony. We've been given such high literacy rates, health statistics. We've been really up there. And people wanted to emulate us. Now people are like, learn the Sri Lankan model not to be like that, not to go down that road. Because they're very confused. How can a country with such good indices end up in this situation? They keep saying, for example, people would ask, should we stop taking loans? Other countries. No, that's not the issue here. Corruption is the issue. How you take the loans, what you do with them, how much you put into your pocket. Nothing should be going into your pocket when you take loans, when you take international assistance, when you get grants, when you get gifts. That must be coming for the benefit of the country as a whole. But that's where we have to go to, once again, go back to that whole thing of thinking about the country. How many people are concerned about the country and the future of the country? I mean, even if you look at this whole notion of leaving the country or staying in the country, I mean, it's a very sensitive, controversial area to go into, because people say, what about my children? My children don't have a future.
Exactly.
So they have a point there. They have a point, but at the same time, leaving is also not the solution. How do we balance this out? Is there foreign exchange coming into the economy? What measures have we taken to stop the corruption that is in the country? it's easy to say, okay, from now onwards we will start doing things. But what measures have been taken? There must be concrete proposals, programs. The international community is watching all these things. And every country wants a positive image.
Yeah.
No country wants to be viewed in a negative way. Individuals don't want that. Obviously, individual leading a country, and countries don't want that either. But to build that positive image, you have got to take tangible steps within the country. You've got to understand reality for one hand. You can't deny things. You can't say, economic crisis, what economic crisis? Sometimes you look at things happening in Sri Lanka, you wonder what economic crisis. Restaurants are packed. People are having a good time. I mean, this one thing this economic crisis has really exposed to us is the massive divide between those who have and those who don't have.
That's right.
That has really gotten exposed. Those who don't have are suffering in a terrible situation. Those who have are managing. They are riding the wave. They're having a good time in the process. I mean, this is a country that is resilient.
Yeah.
We came out of the tsunami, we came out of the conflict, we've come out of lots of things. But we've also got to be very mindful of the fact that going forward, we can't leave things to luck, chance, hope. Great. So far, luck has been on our side to some extent.
Yeah.
India has come forward and supported. Other countries have given us something. We're making progress with international financial institutions. But that does not mean that you're going to sit back and say outside world must help. We must be doing tangible things within in order for them to look at us positively. We have got to build our image. We have got to write the narrative. Very often we wait for others to point fingers. We are not proactive, we are reactive. Others will say, you have not done this. Okay, we will then do this. You haven't been, okay, we will implement it. No, we have to be going out there saying, we have done this, we have done something else, we have taken measures. We have got to be proactive.
Okay, I think that's important because right now also soon after these decisions were made and now the new president has been elected and all of that, a lot of people are saying everything, most of the time what I hear is, let's hope. Isn't that something people
Hope has to be followed up with tangible action.
That's right.
It's very good to think positively. It's very good to hope for good things to happen. Yes, sometimes all we have is hope. But we must follow that up with measures, action.
That's right.
Individuals must be doing things.
Yeah.
We can't sit back and say, hopefully the IMF will give us money. Hopefully we will get aid. Hopefully the tourists will come. Hopefully investment will come. Hopefully we will get opportunities to export our products. Now, unless we take actual measures in all of those sectors, nothing will happen. Everybody will be saying the same thing and sitting back and waiting. Tangible measures have to be taken. You need to have a plan. You need to have a strategy going forward. Otherwise, you cannot achieve it.
That's right. And now throughout this discussion, as we're now coming into the latter part of today's discussion, George, throughout you have been highlighting how Sri Lanka could learn things and certain lessons and drawing lines comparatively to other countries and their parliamentary systems. I would like to ask you in detail, like what lessons can Sri Lanka really learn in this current socio-political and economic environment from the international community?
The first thing is the lesson of strategizing.
Right.
Looking to the future. Look at our neighboring countries, look at some of the most powerful countries out there on the world stage. How have they achieved those positions? How have they come into that particular strata of global society? Look at a country quite close to us like Singapore. Look at where Singapore is today and look at where we are. Look at where countries in the Arab world, in West Asia, at one time they were considered to be just deserts. You can't do anything, no arable land, no fertile soil to grow, agriculture is not going to work. It's just sand, sand, sand and more sand. They're not in that position today. Look at how their leaders have planned going forward. Countries like Oman, I recall a Ports Authority chairman in Oman talking about where they are today. And his position was, we are not planning for the next year or the year after. We are planning for 25 years from now. Why? Because people before us plan for where we are today. You're not doing it to see benefits you are going to reap. You're doing it to see benefits the next generation and the next are going to reap. This is what we need to develop. This is what we need to learn from these countries. Look at a country as large as China. They are talking about where they want to be in 2049. That is their centenary since the founding of the People's Republic of China. 2049 is decades away.
Exactly.
But already they are thinking, What do we want to achieve? What should be the standard of living? How should we reduce poverty? How should we improve the lives of our people? What development should we have? How should we react to climate change? They are looking at all of these things in the long term. Next year is our 75th anniversary of independence.
Yeah.
In January 2023, we will wake up and realize, oh, next month is independence. What are we going to do? We'll have a parade, we'll have a speech, we'll have a ceremony.
That's right.
Okay, ticked, celebrated 75 years of independence. Have we set targets, have we set goals of what we want to achieve? One of the best lessons we can learn from the world, from other countries, is strategizing, planning. Not just for your term. You won't see the result. When you invest in things like education, you do not see the result during your term as at the head. Because you will have to see gradually students going up through the schooling, secondary education, primary, secondary, when they go to tertiary, when they come into the workforce, now you will see the results. You won't be leader at that point. But that is the vision you must have. It must not be me, myself and I. It should not be my family. It should not be only my friends. That is not the way to go about doing it.
Yeah.
Leaders have also got to look out there and look at other examples and realize that we've got to evolve. They've got to show it by example too. People have to be more educated, no less than that. People have got to realize that they are there to serve us. Politicians are there to serve the people of the country. It's not the other way around.
Yeah.
You know, bowing and scraping before them, bending over backwards for them. That's not necessary. They are also human beings. They are not demigods or some beings who have, as you said, fallen from the sky.
Yeah.
They are also human beings like you and I. They have a heart that beats, they have a brain to think, they have organs that function. They are humans. They must also realize that they shouldn't expect that treatment.
That's where the corruption and the system goes wrong.
This is where things go wrong.
Exactly.
So if I go and if you're the leader, you're the politician, and I say, oh, hi, how are you? How have you been doing? Every morning I come and do this, you're going to think, oh, George is the right person. He is very loyal to me. He will. Now, whether I have the brains or don't have the brains or can do or can't do, you don't care. I'm just saying good morning to you every day. I'm there with you all the time. You think that I'm the right person for the job for you then.
Yeah.
So that is where, when you're looking to the future, not only in terms of that strategizing of where you want to take the country, what you want to achieve for the country, we must be very conscious of the whole process of accountability. How accountable are we? Public funds being spent. What has happened to those funds?
Yeah.
Right? How have those funds been utilized? Now, if you take a leader like Sirmawa Bandaranaike or SWRD Bandaranaike, if you go to their museums, you will find gifts that they received from other leaders. Now, you might think those gifts should be at their home, right? But those were gifts that they were given in their position as Prime Minister of the country.
Wow.
Because they also gave a gift. On behalf of Ceylon, Sri Lanka, they gave a gift to another leader. They got a gift in return. That wasn't a personal gift for you. Do we realize that? Those are in a museum today because they didn't take them home. If they took them home and said, oh, we have gotten this nice vase, this nice ship, this doll, this calendar, whatever thing, and took it home, gold coin, some kind of gem-studded thing, oh, this is ours. It's not ours.
Wow. Okay.
It belongs to the people, because it was the gift that you gave the other leader was bought not with your personal money. It was bought with state money.
Exactly.
So what you get in return is also for the state. So this is where we need to become conscious of that. We have to be held accountable. Declaration of assets and liabilities, especially politicians who are coming to those positions. How do you suddenly amass massive amounts of wealth?
Yeah.
Is it your salary? Oh wow, maybe you're getting, the account process is wrong. They're giving you more than one salary a month. And that's not the case, right?
Yes.
They're giving you just one salary. As an MP or whatever position you hold, you're getting one salary. What are your other sources of income? How are you managing to amass such a huge amount of wealth? What is the accountability? When, leave politicians aside, those who go into the bureaucracy, making sure that this tender, this deal does not accumulate money for you. Because remember, that is money that is from the country, that is being taken and given to you. Why do investors think twice about coming into this country? Because there's so much of corruption. There's no accountability at times. And there is no transparency. So strategizing for the future, accountability, being held accountable for what you are doing, so that you have responsibility and making sure that whatever you're doing is transparent. We must not have the shady deals and deals under the table and making sure that you're going to be looked after later on if you approve something. And this is not only happening at the politician level, this is happening at other levels too.
Definitely.
Which is very wrong. Which is very wrong. We have to stop and ask, why are we supporting that system? Why are we in this system? What are we doing to overcome this system? Because until and unless we as individuals start making that change, they won't make that change. Because they think, oh, people are comfortable with it, let's keep going. I will be able to finish my term, come in my life, and I will get whatever I can get and amass it for generation to generation in my family.
Yeah.
That's what has happened in our country. Our country has not gone wrong because of the system of governance, because of the democracy that we have. It's great. We have a really good democratic system in our country. It's not because of the fact that we have had people who have only wanted to, the main problem is people only focused on themselves.
Yeah.
They've not thought of the long term. Right? Sometimes we blame democracy. We complain about parliament, we complain about the executive, we complain about the presidency, the positions. The problem is in the people who are going into these institutions and the people who are putting those people into those institutions. So the blame comes back to us.
Yeah.
We have got to strategize, we have got to be accountable, we have got to be transparent in our activities. That's what countries can learn from the outside world.
Yeah.
In this current crisis, that's the best example for us to take, or examples for us to take, what the outside world is doing.
Yeah. Thank you so much, George, for enlightening all our thoughts. I think this program is not just for the youth, even for the leaders, and the youth who are going to be leaders and the ones who are in the current positions right now also. I hope they'll watch this, because it's some sense, certain things that you already know. You might think, oh, we've heard this, we know this, we've heard this from news. But when you listen to this, like even for me right now, when you spoke out all of it, I'm like, oh my God, there's a lot to be done. Right? So that responsibility comes down to you, to I, to everyone, all of us, right? So as we bring today's program into an end, I would like to get a brief message from you to the world who are watching us right now.
Going forward as Sri Lankans, one thing that we have got to be very, very conscious of is the fact that this is our country that belongs to more than 21 million people. There's a lot of diversity on the island. If we want to find differences, if we want to find problems, if we want to find obstacles, there are loads. This is a time for us to find common factors, uniting under one label. First thinking, I'm a Sri Lankan, not I belong to community A or religion A or group A or race A or class A or B or whatever it is. That should not be our main priority. We need to unite under one label of being Sri Lankan first. That is a strong message that we can send out to the world. That is a strong message that we can use to the future. That is how we need to be inculcating this into the children of the modern day in order for them to take this message into the future, a future that we will not be there in. That is where we have a huge role to play at this juncture, given what we have faced, given what we have gone through in Sri Lanka in 2022 and the last couple of years.
Thank you so much, George, for sharing that message and a lot more, and making us all educated today, because awareness is key so that we all know what we are doing, and it's our responsibility right now to become a responsible citizen in Sri Lanka. Thank you so much for joining with us. And as you know, today, through this episode under the series of Parlimenthuwa YouTube series, we discussed about effective parliamentary systems around the world, and we drew comparisons with the Sri Lankan parliamentary systems with none other than the diplomatic historian, Dr. George Cooke. Thank you so much once again. And as you know, this is a valuable content. Now you're aware about it and I am aware about it. We need to take this message out so that each and every individual in Sri Lanka knows about this. So make sure you follow, subscribe and follow and comment. We need your comments as well. We need to know what you think about these content and the current systems of Sri Lanka. Share your thoughts through the Sri Lanka Press Institute. You can watch this Parlimenthuwa YouTube series. Thank you so much for joining with us. We shall meet you soon with another episode of the Parlimenthuwa YouTube series. See you soon.